Hello, friend. Welcome back to the Freedom Pivot podcast. Today's guest is someone I've actually been following for nearly 10 years, and I have to say, getting to sit down with her felt like a full circle moment I didn't see coming. Elisabet Lahti is an author and a trainer who works internationally on human centered and body intelligent leadership. She's researching Sisu and life force, and not just from the outside, she lives it. You've probably heard the word Sisu, but I promise you after this conversation you'll understand it in a completely different way. Because the way she talks about it, it's not pushing through or toughing it out, but she talks about it as a form of embodied intelligence we all carry and we all can learn to access. This conversation really moved me, and I think that it will move you too. Here's Elisabet. Hello, Elisabet, and welcome to the Freedom Pivot podcast.
Hey, Hannele. It's really great to be here with you.
Thank you. It's such a privilege to be here. And before we go into the conversation, I want to somehow I feel it's important that I share a short story when I first heard about you because it's been 10
Oh,
years. It was
great.
2016, and I was getting ready for a marathon. And then my life situation was very different then, and I was a single mother and I had a baby. So it was very difficult for me to actually train for the marathon. So I bought a treadmill to my wardrobe. And there I was running between the dirty laundry and everything, and I was listening to you. I remember that I was listening to a podcast where you were, and that gave me actually a lot of strength and sisu to hear about your story and hear about you. And I really wanted to, I want to appreciate that moment and your story
Mm.
because I've been following you ever since. And it's a miracle that now we are neighbors and now we are
Mm.
sitting here on this podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Hannele. And it's it definitely brings a lot of encouragement and warmth because as you know, we're all on our journeys and there are ups and downs, and just thinking of the thousands of miles we both have moved our bodies across time and space since that moment 2016, and then our little paths are intersecting so that we went to our neighboring park yesterday and had a moment there in the sun and enjoying this beautiful phenomena of having someone nearby and having that neighborly fostering that, which I'm really having spent so much time by myself and being the lone hero, which I was 2016, and ever since that there's been a lot of healing and a lot of understanding of how deeply interwoven we are.
Hmm.
And thank you for being part of that we're part of each other's community.
Yeah.
Mm. And I
Hmm.
really respect you, by the way, for the very courageous undertaking that your PhD is. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we dive into the topics of today, for anyone who doesn't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do in the world?
Mm. There are always so many directions to take with a self introduction. Um, who I am is, well, I am forever curious of the phenomena of being human. Uh, Through my first person inquiry and experience, which is how I conducted most of my PhD using autoethnography and phenomenology as the framework. Uh, where I come from is my experience is that to truly understand something, we need to live it. Otherwise, it's theory and concepts. And a little anecdote. When I was about to start my PhD, that definitely took me on quite a whirlwind of an adventure. I went to a friend's place near Helsinki. She gave me this beautiful. She held space for me. It was like a sound bath or something. More this kind of holding a space for inner wisdom to arise. And then we had tea afterwards, and it was one of those lovely. tea brands that comes with a little quote. And the quote that I got just as I was about to embark on a quite a ludicrous adventure of attempting to run the length of New Zealand, 2,400 kilometers, for this PhD and then my personal activism that I wanted to do. The quote said, "The words written here are concepts. You must go through the experiences yourself." And I think I wrote that on the front page of my PhD or the intro or something. And that really defines me. I am forever curious of what makes us tick. The beginning part for my research on Sisu was through personal experience of really deep trauma. And at that time, I spent a lot of nights awake. And the question in my mind was, how do humans overcome extreme adversity? Who does? Who doesn't? And this is an ancient question that we're still seeking to answer and understand. So I'm a human who has a lot of faith in us humans. I have a lot of faith in myself nowadays. Once I did not have. I like to try out things. I like to cultivate being non-judgmental, as opposed to how I used to be. Used to be quite rigid. We need to control things and do them the right way and all that. So I used to be an academic. I guess I still am to that extent that I do research, but I'm more of that. I'm an artist. Yeah.
I love that. Artist feels like this white space
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
definition or
Artist.
a word concept.
Yeah. To let life live through me and there's a lot of surprises there. When we open to this experience of not trying to control it so much, which is what I used to try to do. I tried to always preempt the next few steps to be in control. And I know that we're going to talk about freedom. And we think sometimes, or I at least used to think, that that's freedom. I have the freedom to pursue. I have the freedom to prepare so that I know how it's going to go. And I think I keep myself safe with that. But ultimately, what I'm trying to do is I am actually simply organizing my actions so that the fears I have won't catch me. And I keep myself sterile and I keep myself nicely in a bit of an anesthesia. And what that does is it prevents me also from experiencing the whole color palette and falling in love with my strength, actually. Because we can only experience that through having the courage to step our toes into the pond of courage, experience, uncertainty, and we find treasures.
Yes. Well, I think we can dive straight to the deep end
Straight to the pond.
of freedom, because of course the name of the podcast is the Freedom Pivot, and
Yeah.
it's really about those turning points where something shifts or you choose a different path, or maybe you open up to a different path. Maybe it's not so controlling or choosing or opening path rather than opening up to a different path. But
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your freedom pivot, and is there such thing in your path that you would recognize?
It's a really fantastic topic, I have to say, and quite a creative one. I mean, you could have said this around intuition, for example, but going into this topic of freedom, it's almost like it's something that preempts also intuition, that we build space for it to happen. The same way how I would describe Sisu, which is this Finnish word for embodied internal fortitude. If we want to develop Sisu, it's not so much necessarily approaching it directly. Okay, you can sign up for a marathon and it'll take you on a journey to develop Sisu. But the other way is to do actions that actually open a space for that inner strength to appear, which can be so simple as taking care of ourselves better because we're stronger when we rest. I just had a great sleep last night, and I sometimes look at the data from my watch, and it was like just full 10, and I feel it, and I feel calm and more articulate, and it's easy. And if something really harsh were to happen today, I'm more ready to meet it with calmness than if I was, hadn't slept well, hadn't nourished myself, had some trouble with my intimate relationships that are constantly ongoing, and I refuse to look at them and resolve them, somehow. So freedom pivots. I think if I look back at my life, the whole journey has been this one single large freedom pivot. It's like as if everything is guiding me, and I think the human condition, and there's a foundation for this also found in Jungian psychology, for example, that what our psyche seeks to do, what drives it, what's a driving dynamic force, is actually the psyche's quest for freedom and to know itself, for integration, so that we're not bits and pieces here and there parsed together with thin threads, but that we are wholesome, substantious. And in that journey, sometimes when we're actually on our way of moving forward, it can appear as if we're regressing really badly. Because if I take again from Jungian thinking and depth psychology, our psyche sometimes and often seems to recreate those situations, say from our childhood, that were left unresolved, and there were conditions ingrained in us that actually stand in the way of our freedom, that are based on fear, self-preservation, that are other people's ideas and thoughts of how the world works and what we should be afraid of and who we are. So that's very common that it happens in intimate relationships or the kind of business partners we choose, that the condition or the situation that created a difficult pattern, we seek to recreate it so that we could then resolve it. And this is all subconscious. So I've definitely had a lot of those in my life where I've been in the wrong place, the wrong time with the wrong people. But at the end of the day, because the only mistake I believe we can do if we really, really refuse to grow from a situation, that we keep repeating the same mistake again and again. So we can do all kinds of silly things and screw up quite badly too. But the consciousness and the awareness is then like, okay, what happened? What led to this? What can I learn that can then be carried in my pocket as a little nugget of gold? And so there's a lot of self-compassion also that's needed for this journey of continuous freedom pivoting. I think if I were to single out some kind of an experience that I find that there's a before and after, I think it would have to be this some kind of a change in my kind of how I view the world and myself. That there's a time where life seemed to happen to me, and then I would respond to it. Then I would also always have someone to blame, my parents, government, uh, political systems, economic systems, which are definitely things to deeply inquire because there are a lot of flaws in those. But after we become aware, then if we get stuck with that and we forget the self-reflection part and how do I take responsibility, what can I do and act, how I can act based on that, there's a shift that I noticed. And then things start to change slowly. So I'll give an example. One of the most revolutionary thoughts that occurred to me some years ago, maybe this is 5 years ago, and there was definitely some good freedom pivots before that, but this thought that I can choose my thoughts. And when it hit me, I felt it in my whole body. And of course, I haven't been able to choose all my thoughts ever since, because it requires a lot of practice and just like being aware. And being aware requires coming to my body, and that has been a 20-year process. So I think becoming aware of just how much agency I can have, and how useful it is to do things that allow me to grow my agency with that. So accepting personal responsibility for my life and then the actions I choose has been the biggest freedom pivot for me, because then I stop living under the dogma of other people and I become myself. And that's for the Jungian sense, the road to integration and individuation, to actually become me, not my parents, not the culture even, but actually who I truly am.
Wow. That's the, uh, well, there's so much to unpack there, but I feel that's, that, I don't know if I dare to use the word ultimate freedom, because then
Yeah.
with that kind of freedom, you're actually free wherever you are and
Yeah.
whatever the conditions are, because it's something that is coming from inside and not something that is like enabled by the external factors or something that is happening outside of us.
Hmm. And at some point, unfortunately, to many of us, it happens so, and it happened to me, that at some point we believe this lie that we're not lovable, that it comes from somewhere, for someone else who were given that narrative, and for whatever reason they didn't have chance to transform it. And whatever we don't transcend, we transmit. It's this ancient chain that it just goes on until there's a awareness to it, like, hey, that's not true. No. And me deep down inside, not really truly knowing and believing that I am lovable, led me to have my freedoms trespassed and taken for abused, and my limits, because I how can you set a boundary and a limit if you don't know where it is? And self-worth is an incredibly important uh, roadmap, a tool in this. And so being able to find slowly my way back, first cognitively, into this thing of like, okay, I'm enough. That's a big thought to already start to entertain. Uh, and then some time ago, one of the biggest, okay, freedom pivots again, I would really have to name this, was this really deep embodied experience of that I am lovable, I am lovely. And what resulted from that was actually, it changed how I give talks. I do keynotes and trainings, because knowing that I am lovable and I'm enough just as I am, and I have my own flaws, as we all do, but there's a good intention. There was a fearlessness to how I told the stories. There was a fearlessness to my humor, a courageousness to lead, and coming from that place, it reproduces that self. Relaxedness begets and creates more relaxedness. And knowing how our nervous system works, I'm not going to go too deep into that because that's a big, wonderful rabbit hole. But just knowing how our nervous systems communicate at all times and they co-regulate, by cultivating and finding those kinds of relationships that allow us to explore that side of freedom in us, is maybe the most valuable thing, because then we can create more lovingness in us, and then we can love other people kind of to the extent we can love others. And sometimes it's a bit easier even to love other people and say kind things to them than to ourselves. But yeah, this finding this self acceptance and self love has been a important journey. And like, I'm over 40, so it's been a long, long adventure, I would
Mm.
say.
Yeah, and I heard this wonderful quote from Tommy Helsten a few weeks ago
Mm.
that all the challenges that we face in life are like curated for us with love, just because that we keep on repeating those cycles
Yeah.
until we find the love in us, and that's kind of the healing process where it starts. And I love how you connect freedom with
Mm.
love here.
Mm. And I would also raise beauty.
Mm.
I listened to a fantastic pod or an interview with James Hillman yesterday, who he was a student of Carl Jung, and I would say like really one of the most giant hearts and minds in that field. Absolutely stunning, stunning human. And he was giving this interview. I think he's almost in his 80s. So this really crystallized gentleness, wisdom, and courage. Like direct expression of things. And he said it so beautifully. Like this was already maybe, I don't know, maybe it was 15 years ago. But he said that there needs to be a better word than sustainability for what we are aiming for. And he said that by simply raising this idea of sustainability in the forefront of how we need to act now, it has a bit of it comes from outside. We need to create something in the outside so that we don't die, so that we don't blow up everything. But there's like an externalization to it. Like it's like an instrumental thing. And what he said, we need to find beauty in what we see around us on this planet, in other people. Because when you see beauty and you notice it, you fall in love. And then when you fall in love with the world, with the nature, with each other, you want to protect it. You become a steward, not a someone who calculates how do we make this endure and last longer, which is sustainability. Again, right direction where to go, but it's far from what this deeper transcendence or nourishment of the soul that makes us extremely strong, and that's what I research, inner strength. So that I found very, very inspiring and worthwhile of musing on.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it somehow kind of catches the essence, the
Mm.
word, and the concept of beauty, which we
Mm.
sometimes mix with something very superficial or vanity or something like that, and that to the fact that beauty actually is it's everything. It's
Yeah.
everything. And so connected to these deeper
Is it o
concepts.
is it
Mm.
okay to share a moment from yesterday when we read the book
Yes, absolutely.
by by um by Heidi Liehu?
Yes.
Uh, Absolutely a stunning researcher, academian, artist, poet, and her book Perhosten valtakunta, which is 1,065 pages, and it's her, I believe it was her PhD. And we opened it and we read it, and I think that was a moment where I was touched by beauty, and you were touched by beauty because there was such like a freedom and a courageousness to those words in like 1998 when the world was not ready to go on such a deep exploration of the imbalance that we're experiencing between the mind and the body and the reason, intuition, all these polarities in a world that has been governed by hierarchy, logic, rationality, the absolute truth and knowledge, absolute information. And there we were, sitting on a bench in a park, and we were flooding with tears. And I saw those tears glimmering in the sunlight behind your glasses, and it was so lovely because it gave me permission also to feel. Um, and when we get to spend a moment like that with a friend, there's so much life force and nourishment that happens in that. So those are the moments I really, really value and treasure more than, let's say, I give a really badass keynote in a conference, which is, of course,
Mm.
also important for my journey and of courage. But ultimately, the moment on a bench being moved with you is something I would recollect from my life, truly.
Yeah. I can for sure say that I will never forget that moment. It was such a
Mm.
profound, profound experience. And
Mm.
very unexpected, very, very unexpected, like on a random Tuesday evening on a park bench. Like, who knows what kind of beauty life can bring when
Yes.
you're open to experience it.
That's and that vitalizes us. That's
Yeah,
life force. And then we are also more resilient when life gives us that we're a bit low on oxygen or something happens, you know.
exactly. And I think that we are getting closer and closer to then Sisu when you're talking about inner strength and resilience and all these kind of concepts near Sisu. And we don't have to go into your research, but I think that many people might have, well, they have probably heard the word, especially here in Finland, but maybe they don't fully
Mm.
understand what it actually means. So maybe you can just like briefly
Yeah.
say what it means to you right now.
Yeah. Yeah, let's have a relaxed inquiry on it as in because I my theory is and what I've seen when I've given a lot of I had a chance to speak a lot about Sisu also abroad, where the word concept is not so known. But what I keep um, noticing and experiencing again and again is okay, I come and I bring this concept that's unknown. Then I explain it usually through a mix of research, connecting it to other science, embodied cognition, uh, the somatic foundation of our thinking, of how our whole body, how our thinking happens, for example, in the whole body. We don't just think with our brain in the head, but our brain in the gut and our entire body is intelligent. And this is maybe the biggest side step we have taken 400 years ago, where we located intelligence and thought inside the skull. And so we're only using half of our brain. No wonder it's so freaking hard, you know? So there's that side, but also the side of stories and experiences. And when I do it like that, what I notice is there's a light kind of that is lit up, and people realize that, oh, I know what she's talking about. I know so much about that. It was when I had to muster all the strength I had when I had nothing. And alone, I might maybe didn't have anything. And then I had a friend who came, or I found a memory within me of a past experience where I displayed this ability to surrender and find strength through that, or I found and mustered the ability to really press hard and break through. Sometimes the sisu is it's a breaking down or it's a breaking through.
Mm.
There's so many ways how it is expressed, and we have, I keep saying this that even in Finland we have like 5.5 million of experts of sisu, and of course, I'm like putting myself out of business by saying this, but because it is true, like all life is a life of sisu, and it's a life of love, and it's a life of gathering understanding, and it's like a very universal human experiences, what sisu denotes. And I would say even, that this is a planet of sisu. It's part of the human experience to overcome and get to know ourselves through hardships. They're they're abundant. We can't really remove them, and but it's important that we have those because certain laws seem to be in place, which is that the organism gains strength through disorder. It gains strength through disruption and even breakage. So, how a muscle is built. You go to the gym, you lift weights, and what happens? The tissue breaks. And then, because it repairs itself, the you can actually see when you go first, it looks like there's nothing, and you keep being committed. And each time there's almost like this Japanese thin silk paper layer that's built and built. And with that, you can build a whole mountain. It's like adding a layer and adding a layer. And that's how the body gets stronger through that. There's a concept from Nicholas Nassim Taleb, who's a former trader turned risk analyst, but he's more, I would say, he's kind of like he's a philosopher. I don't know if you would appreciate this or not, but trying to understand unexpected events and disasters and what they create. And he has this concept of anti-fragile, which is this idea of how organisms gain strength through disorder and disruption and disaster. And so I want to bring this kind of in accordance to this. What we also need to speak about is how tender our system is and our nervous system, why we need to do self-leadership so that we lead ourselves and our nervous systems, because we're constantly in a dialogue, and we're surprisingly also, until we develop this ability to be grounded in ourselves, we're surprisingly vulnerable to other people's moods and even this invisible nervous system activity that our fear response might, trigger us, and we get shaky, fight or flight or fawn, where we get kind of paralyzed. But at the same time, what's also true is we've come through an incredibly long journey. Our nervous system is immensely robust. We're a very strong species. And when we look at the nature, that's the most astounding example of this robustness. And we're living inside this planet that can teach us so much of this anti-fragility. And so there is this paradoxality, I don't know if that's the word, but this in so many things, there's a paradox that there's strength and there's weakness. There is the yang of action, that we must take action and create and build so that we move onwards. But at the same time, we should do it with our not squeezing the wheel, like as Esa Saarinen, a Finnish professor, likes to say, that when you're like squeezing the wheel and pressing it, you go into that you're controlling it, and then we get a bit blind. That's the negative sisu that can also happen. So sisu being this internal fortitude to do what seems maybe a bit impossible. Sisu is the next edge, I would say. It's the next edge. Traditionally, Sisu in the Finnish culture has been connected to these really heroic stories of, let's say, Paavo Nurmi, this Finnish long-distance runner who stayed invincible. Was it 108 or 112 or something like that races? It was invincible. Like it was absolutely like there's no wonder that there was this total craze around Paavo Nurmi that he's like superhuman. And anyone who's ever ran and felt the lactic acid and that feeling when you're just like, I'm gonna die right now, and there's another competitor, and I'm gonna like it's a horrible feeling, and then you muster that energy and you push through, and these examples also metaphorically in real life. Your parent, you need to like do a billion things at the same time, and then you have work and something comes up and you have things to deal with your partner, responsibilities. Like there's so much happening at all times. And so I beautifully lost my train of thought by venturing into Paavo Nurmi, but this idea that there can be this constructive sisu where we use it to further the things and we're able to push through really hard things. And life depends on that too, like we all have to do it. But at the same time, recognizing when it maybe turns against us, when it becomes harmful. And this is actually one of the core pieces of my research. And this is something that for whoever wants to dive more into it, beyond kind of the intuitive reflection that is very easy to do just based on our conversation of looking back in our lives, that where did we overdo something? Did we end up overextending ourselves and developing burnout or pre-burnout or something that we really exhausted our personal energy? Or the second part, that the how harmful Sisu hurts ourselves, but it also hurts other people. When we become super harsh and hard, there was these gazes of mercilessness that were mentioned by one respondent to the data I collected about it was 2013, and then the paper came out 2019, embodied fortitude. So that's something to read. It's open access. And then there's Gentle Power is my book in English. There's Sisun Alchemia by Tammi, which I really love. That came out last year, actually around exactly this time.
Oh.
So this learning to notice where it has gone overboard, so that we are able to endure, because life is really about the ultra run. It's not a sprint. So even if we momentarily are able to push really hard, sometimes we need to do it, like really, really put everything into it. But to do it in a way that's, now here I would use the word that we can sustain it. Maybe finding beauty in what we do will definitely help, but like the sustained effort. We need to also take care of ourselves and restore that strength, which is something sometimes people who have a lot of Sisu forget to do. So, okay, I'll put a dot here because I think I'm moving on to so many different directions at the same time. So let's see where you're going to take this.
Yeah, there are so many things that I'd like to
Yeah.
ask and talk about, but I just one thing that came to my mind was when I remember reading about and following your ultra run through New Zealand, and something you said like, I don't, I'm not running 2,400 kilometers, but I'm running 1 kilometer 2,400 times. And I remember, and I think it speaks to this anti-fragile thing that you're just putting these thin layers. It's not like you're just, you have the mountain, but you're just building it very thin layer
Yeah.
by layer. And then it actually becomes so much stronger because of that.
Oh, I'm so happy you brought that up, because that is something I used to mention quite often, but I forgot about that because like, we have so many sentences crisscrossing in one brain. But yes, that's a really good point, actually. To do like it's 1 kilometer at a time, and simply because how the human brain works is that it's so easy to get overwhelmed when we think of a task as the huge summit, and it can be anything in our daily life. It might be that there's a death in the family, and then you need to sort out all kinds of practicalities that come with it, with possessions and human relations, and then you have your grief, and there's just so much that it can actually put our nervous system in this state of fawn, this that we just get completely out of life force and almost a bit paralyzed. So then what seems to help in my own practical experience, and also supported by research, is simply looking at the one simple next step. And sometimes it might be simply to take a shower. It could be a very, very plain thing, or going outside, sitting in the sun for a little while and taking a few breaths to calm the nervous system. Sometimes the next step is not action at all if we are extremely tired. So this misunderstanding of Sisu, that it's always about putting more effort and pushing through, it really depends on the situation where we are in. If we cultivate that ability to training and practice, that we're putting in the kilometers, real ones or proverbial ones, where we teach our brain to respond in a relaxed manner to stress and discomfort and challenge, because we can train that by very little things. Like cold exposure is a really good way to do that, actually. It's not dangerous to the body, but the body thinks it is. There are a lot of good health benefits to it, but good God, it feels every time equally, ew, I don't want to do it. But by doing it, there's a way to develop that skill. And then that skill gets also transferred to a real life situation, more likely, when something happens. But if one is in a state where the life force and energy is already depleted, then, it's a message. Like our bodies are extremely intelligent. We don't feel tired because our body is an asshole, that it doesn't want us to succeed or overcome or have energy. I think very often those stories come from somewhere else, come from this performance culture, might come from previous generations where there really was no space for that healthy kind of self nurture and appreciation because there was no space. We had to build this, or we, as in like, as the human society living here, I was not part of that, but them, our grandparents, they paid a huge price for it. There was a lot of harsh sisu that went into
Yeah.
it. And now what we have, I hope, is an opportunity to cultivate a more balanced approach to what sisu is. What I call it gentle power. If that's triggering to someone that we need to now bring gentleness, because it can be. Love can be triggering, gentleness can be triggering. It used to be for me. I was always feeling a bit like, is this some kind of a trick that someone is trying to lure me into not pursuing my goals? And what happens if we don't push on and just go with this huge fortitude? Nothing happens. We don't get anything done. But when I realized that actually when I bring in gentleness, or we can call it constructive sisu, more neutral. But when we bring in gentleness through self-care, through bringing care into our relationships, uh, it is a it is a fact from life experience and from research that we actually become more stronger through that nurture of our social relations, our networks, our intimate relationships, our relationship to ourselves, because then we are more likely to notice when we're off balance. And the more time we spend off balance and leaking energy, we're actually sabotaging ourselves and some huge undertakings that we might need to do that will require sisu. So therefore, bringing in that piece of self-care as well into sisu will make it more harmonious. And last one to this breath is a saying that I believe is quoted to special forces in the US or Navy SEALs, and it goes something like, "It's slow is steady, and steady is fast."
Mm.
Mm.
Yes. And how often we think that slow is. I,
Yeah,
for one, can actually I absolutely identify myself like slow is like something to, you need to be fast. You need to be fast to
yeah.
survive and capture all the opportunities in this world. So slowness is definitely my lifelong
Well, fastness
learning.
gives us that instant gratification.
Mm.
Because when we do something, we see immediately its impact in the world. So we have a lot of data and proof that it works. But anything in excess or anything in lack is an imbalance and ultimately will prevent optimal effort and execution and behavior and performance and results for those who really need to think about that. Let's say in the business world,
Mm.
work
Yeah.
life, everywhere.
I wanted to shortly touch upon the movement that you have created, Sisu Not Silence. Bought the t-shirt long
No,
ago.
thanks for buying the t-shirt.
So,
Yeah.
how, what could you say about the movement and how it was born or how it is today?
Yeah. Well, the movement, I would say, right now it has been in a bit in a hiatus, if that's the word. Um, Waiting to see how it's going to integrate in this time and through who I am now, really. But the beginning part of that was when I was doing my PhD, doing the research on Sisu, and then I had these life experiences that, in the first place, even brought me to that place of researching what is this internal strength? And because I'm from Finland, I, through many serendipitous occurrences, happened to stumble upon this concept from my own native culture, realized that it hadn't been empirically researched, even though it's very central to our understanding of the Finnish mindset and all that. And set on this quest to find tools for myself. And that quest became something that became research, became something that I think will be in some form my life work, probably forever, you know? Uh, and so first, when I did the research, I did it in a more traditional way, gathered data, analyzed it using thematic analysis. And that's the embodied fortitude introduction to Sisu paper. But then when I was done with that, I pretty soon realized I had more questions than answers. And quite close to what you are doing in your PhD, researching intuition, it's quite a research-wise, Sisu is quite a it's kind of a mess, you know, because it's pre-cognitive. Because okay, again, it's everything and everything, because everything is connected. So even I'm doing this separating the mind and the body, but since we're doing that and we have done it at the expense of the body, we need to a little bit talk about the body and just put it into perspective so that they would be in more harmony. But in reality, everything is interconnected. There is no mind and body. In the body, everything is one. And for humans, one of our lacks and deficiencies is that we have a bit of a hard time uh, understanding really, really large systems. We need to name them. We need to put them in boxes so we can kind of see what we're dealing with. And we have this constant yearning to name and understand, which has led to a lot of evolution also. But so Sisu is more on the side of just like intuition. It's subjective, it's experiential, it's felt, it's embodied, it's preverbal. And that's what I was dealing with as a research topic. So I realized pretty soon that I need to somehow go inside this phenomena. And then I wondered, well, how do I do that? And how do I do that with people? Because it's absolutely not something I want to do, and it's unethical to, let's say, create a situation where people are put under extreme adversity. Let's say a burning house, and then you collect data on what happens. Like that's a real case situation of what happens in the moment like that. So that's a no. So then I realized that, well, my own life is mine. I'm a curious explorer of the human phenomena. So I can be this laboratory of N of one. Maybe I'll do it through myself, which is again, very established research tradition to research it through our own lived experience. And from there came these two fieldwork experiments that I did, which the first one was to train. I took 2 years to train to run the length of New Zealand. This was based on my experiences with domestic violence, interpersonal violence, which was the onset for Sisu research, and realizing what a global, massive issue we're dealing with that, and how much, beside the actual violence when it happens, there's what is called in social research this the double blow. So there's the first blow, which is the violence. The second blow is the shaming of the abused. That somehow there's this narrative that's very prevalent that you're somehow responsible. You carry the shame as the experiencer and not the one who commits the acts of violence. And that you're somehow almost like permanently marked or damaged, weak. And I noticed these because I was living through that, finding my way to healing, and it's been a really, really long path. And I would say that the most incredible result of that path of healing is that, I have been able to find my way back to love because I lost that path completely. I thought I would never be able to trust humans again. let alone in a romantic situation. And now I'm there, incredibly beautiful human in my life. And so there's a lot of opportunity also that we can heal, but it takes us. We need each other for that. And for that, the cultivation of safe nervous system is so immensely important. We never know what anyone has gone through, and highly likely that all of us have gone through something dramatic in different ways. So, so what I wanted to do was research Sisu. I had deep love for New Zealand for whatever reason that I can't really even describe why. And then thirdly, I saw a massive human rights problem in the world, and I wanted to do something about it. And then that created this where everything, all those three came apart in a dream, actually. And then later, I took that dream on the road and I lived it true. And that became Sisu Not Silence, which was this project activism, choosing courage over silence. Everywhere we go, it's the part of that freedom. And getting to that place that we have the courage to say, yes, that's okay with me, sounds good. And also the courage to say, no, thanks. No, I don't want to come there. I don't want that. I don't want to continue this interaction. I'm going to cancel this. Or I want to reach out more. I would say yes, knowing ourselves and having the courage because, and I also want to kind of open up this idea that it's not a trivial thing to learn to say no and yes to right things. Because to say no, evolutionarily, and evolutionary psychology wise, from the point of view of our nervous system and our ability to sustain life, when we say no, we put ourselves in the risk that we'll be rejected if we don't yield or we don't harmonize with whatever is asked from us, even at our own expense. And so there's a really strong pull to align ourselves with our environment. Don't be difficult. It's don't create trouble. Like people might have to deal with your emotions. They might have to deal with their own sense of rejection when we say no. They might retaliate. They might challenge us. There's so many nuances to that. But if we speak of freedom, it's one of the most important roads of maturity, really, that we take, is to find that no. And it's a step by step. And again, a lot of self-compassion. It's not going to happen overnight. And there's going to be, some situation that's going to challenge it, even if you found it. And we go a little bit like we know in our body that this is not something where what's the best use of my time. And then we say yes. And then when we're doing it, we know that, yeah, okay, my gut feeling was right. But then we can take that wisdom and next time just have a pause. Like there's such a hurry to say yes and give a response. And there's a lot of pressure in this world. It's fast paced. But I really practice a lot nowadays is when I get a request for anything, to take a few breaths and just ask myself that, is this something that feels like a yes? Do I want to do this? Can I say, wait a moment, I'll get back to you. So that my yes is a real yes.
Yeah.
And then we both feel it. But anyway, to kind of quickly, or not quickly, but succinctly go back to, so Sisu Not Silence then was used as part of this PhD project, but also the international movement to break the silence around domestic violence, break the shame around it, just create more space to discuss these experiences with less shame. I wanted to highlight the strength and beauty and courage of overcomers, women, men, girls, boys, people of any identity, that there's a bright, wonderful future ahead of us, and we can create that together. And we need these stories to be inspired. So, because again, that survival instinct, negativity bias can glue ourselves either on that huge, unsurmountable mountain we see that it overwhelms us, or it glues our gaze into what hasn't worked and into what's wrong, into the fear, negativity, shame. And then that contracts our life force. It gets tinier and tinier and tinier, and we have so little space to move suddenly. But when we're able to sometimes get inspired by our own past, so I often encourage stories of Sisu, reflecting on them, pausing on them, honoring yourself for the incredible track record we all have in overcoming and using our Sisu. So this is what I mean. We're all experts on this, and we might have just forgotten that we are. Or then sharing and hearing other people's stories. Like you shared that really beautiful example of you in the closet training, and you heard me on a podcast. Well, I have a similar story. And I wonder if I would have ever ended up dreaming New Zealand into real life or doing an Ironman, which like was my dream for 16 years, but it was just never kind of happening. But I heard a story on a radio show from the US with Norma Bastidas, who's a Mexican ultra runner. She's a human trafficking survivor and overcoming. And she told her story of this really really horrible things that had happened to her and how she got like sisued up and she wanted to take action. There was this fire that adversity can also spark in us, hopefully. Like this world will change when we all take a little action somewhere, and some will take huge actions, but whatever that thing is that belongs to us, then we do our thing. But for her, it was right then she was describing her campaign to prevent human trafficking and create more awareness of it, help human trafficking survivors. And how she was drawing attention to it was to do, how many was it? Like, was it 25 Ironmans or 40 or like a horribly massive number of Ironmans on consecutive days? And how she would do it, she would follow the path of what the human traffickers follow when they traffic girls, boys, adults across the border to the US. And, and I heard this, and I've never heard anything so crazy in my whole life. And this, like, the power of the human body, and this woman who was close to ruining her life with alcohol because she just wanted to escape the pain. And then from drinking, she turned to running. Like in these nights when she just wanted to drink herself to oblivion, somehow she decided to go move her body and go running instead. And what she discovered that she had a really good skill for that. And she had a lot of Sisu. And she had a lot of reason to do that because these superordinate goals, when something happens that we see that there's an injustice, especially when it touches us, that can really fire up a lot of that Sisu in us, like it did for me, this violence. Without that goal, I would have never run the length of New Zealand. Absolutely not. And so I heard her example. And when I had this dream of, first there was an actual dream during a nap. And then 5, 6 years later, when I was in the PhD program, I remembered this dream. And then I really dreamed it that maybe I'll actually do this. And then it was totally a random number. I thought of, okay, I'll run the length of New Zealand and then 50 days. Okay, 50 sounds good. And then I went to see how long it is. And then I calculated how many kilometers a day. And even on that journey, for the sake of direct communication again, it's in the middle of that journey. I'll just say, because this is a long story, but this is kind of a moment of, by the book. Because it's in the book, beautifully described, the miracle of day 12 in Sisu Alchemia, of what happened there and when I pivoted into my own agency when I was about to break down and what happened. And that was the most beautiful moment of freedom, actually, when I had the courage to do it my way and then sustain my energy. And I also led by example of how we need also gentleness in our crazy pursuits. But when I first had this idea that I'll do this, I sent Norma Bastidas a tweet back in the day when Twitter was still cool. And I was on it. I sent her a tweet and said, I have this crazy dream. Can I call you? And she sent me her phone number. And I got to talk with my Shiro.
Wow.
And I told her that I'm not a runner. I've ran a marathon maybe, it was years ago, and I was totally sedentary at that time. And I have this dream that I want to run the length of New Zealand, 50 ultra marathons consecutively. And by doing this, I want to understand the determinants of human strength so that I can share it through my own experience. And then I want to promote this idea of how do we create compassionate communities and resist violence really by building these better cultures. And her comment was, awesome idea. You can do it. So that's why we need each other. Yeah, and it's an ever-going chain, just like intergenerational trauma is a chain that goes endlessly until it's stopped. The power of these stories and us inspiring each other is also an endless chain, and it is much more powerful. You need to only bring in a dark closet
Yes.
one match, not 10, not 100. The one match will light the whole closet.
Yeah.
So this is now the experience of Sisu discussed between two humans who've been there, who will be there, who are learning constantly more about how it is expressed and how it's more harmonious. And so I think for me, it's nowadays more and more about describing Sisu through art, through storytelling, through my presence than creating endless and endless and endless and endless amounts of words on a paper, which is also a beautiful way, and I've loved it. But this is just my evolution, and which feels good right now. So this is my freedom.
Ah, what a perfect way to kind of close the conversation. But I just want to thank you for this wonderful and rich conversation. But before you go, I want you to share how can people find you and learn more about your work and buy your books, which I warmly recommend.
Everything is at sisulab.com. So there's link to Instagram, and I have two podcasts, Sisu Not Alchemy in Finnish and Sisu Lab, which it's a side project. It's something that's there, and when I encounter people that I want to have a conversation with, then I'm just like, why don't we just do a Zoom, and I'll put it there. So I update it infrequently, but there are some really beautiful conversations in both in English and in Finnish. And the English book can be found through Adlibris, Gentle Power. And the more evolved thinking, I would say, Gentle Power is from 2023. It was written in 2021. The initial idea came during COVID when I was thinking, what does strength look like in this time? Where do we need to go as humanity? And there's a reason why that book is named Gentle Power and not Sisu, because there's the direction for that healthy, even though it's a bit more challenging than just to do that hard ass Sisu, the single-sided. Yeah. And then Sisun Alkemia, which is tarinoita elämästä, voimasta ja elämän voimasta. And I'm really happy about that book. I wrote it twice. The feedback for the first round was from my editors that this is a fantastic tietokirja, like a knowledge research book, but we don't hear your voice here yet. So could you write this again? Just when I have given birth to it, and I knew that there was that like my inner being, and that to be more on the skin. And then I did it. I parsed it in pieces, and I did the project again, and I'm really happy about it. So that's the easiest probably is kirja.fi, which is the site by Tammi and WHVSOU, where you can buy all those books. And then Rosebud has it, for example, right now. So, and whenever, we're somewhere in the same space, whether it's an event or something, then just, come say hi.
Yes. Thank you so much for this conversation today. I feel like we've shared something profound today.
I really have to say that this, in my lifetime of podcasts, of interviewing and being interviewed, and it's numerous occasions. I have to say this is one of the podcasts, or maybe even the podcast, where I feel most that I was just so seen, and there was a space to jalostaa, that I was able to communicate something that's actually a little bit difficult. So it was a really beautiful experience for me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for everybody listening.
Yes.